The salvage ship drifted through the dead zone like a small fish swimming through a graveyard of giants. Captain Voran of the Veloxy species kept his 4 eyes fixed on the scanner display, watching the ancient debris float past his vessel. This region of space had been forbidden for 3,000 years, but the Coalition had recently opened it for salvage operations. The war that had scarred this place was ancient history now, or so everyone believed. "Captain, I am picking up something strange," said his navigator, a young female named Teki. Her scales had turned pale blue with confusion. "There is a large mass hidden inside the asteroid cluster ahead. Very large." Voran leaned forward in his command chair. "How large? I cannot tell. My instruments say it is impossible." Teki adjusted her controls with trembling claws. "The readings suggest something bigger than a Coalition battle station, but that cannot be right. Nothing was that big." The largest ships in the galaxy were the Thessian dreadnoughts, and they were considered engineering miracles. Voran ordered his pilot to move closer, his curiosity overwhelming his caution. They had come here looking for ancient technology to sell. Perhaps they had found the greatest prize in salvage history. As they navigated through the asteroid field, the shape began to emerge from the darkness. At first, Voran thought he was looking at a small moon. Then he saw the angular lines, the symmetrical structures, the unmistakable signs of artificial construction. His hearts began to beat faster. "What is that?" whispered Teki. The vessel stretched across the void like a sleeping beast. It was black as the space around it, covered in dust and micrometeorite scars from 3,000 years of drifting. But even in its dormant state, even buried in debris and darkness, the ship radiated a sense of terrible power. Gun ports lined its hull like scales on a predator. Hangar bays gaped open like hungry mouths. The design was unlike anything in Coalition records, yet somehow familiar. Voran felt his blood turn cold. He had seen drawings of ships like this in historical archives. Ships from the species that had destroyed themselves and nearly taken the galaxy with them. "That is a human vessel," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Teki made a sound of disbelief. "Humans have been dead for 3,000 years. This must be a wreck, nothing more." "Run a full scan," Voran ordered. "Check for power signatures, life signs, anything active." The scan took several minutes. When the results appeared on the display, Teki's scales turned white with fear. "Captain, there are biosignatures inside. Faint, but present. Hundreds of them. And the ship's core is not dead. It is in some kind of standby mode, drawing minimal power from solar radiation." Voran stared at the ancient supercarrier floating before him. Inside that massive hull, humans still lived. Somehow, impossibly, the most feared species in galactic history had survived their own extinction. "Get us out of here," he commanded. "We need to report this to Coalition Command immediately." The news spread through the Galactic Coalition like fire through dry grass. Within hours, the 12 species that made up the alliance were in complete chaos. Emergency sessions were called on every homeworld. Military fleets were mobilized. Communication channels overflowed with panicked messages. High Counselor Thex of the Kathrani sat in his private chamber, reading the salvage crew's report for the 10th time. His ancient face showed no emotion, but inside he felt the weight of history pressing down on him. He was old enough to remember the stories his grandmother had told him when he was young. Stories of the human wars. Stories of planets burned to ash and species pushed to the edge of extinction. Stories of a violence so complete that even now, 3,000 years later, entire regions of space remained dead and poisoned. The humans had been powerful beyond measure. Their technology had advanced faster than any species before or since, but something had gone wrong inside them. Some darkness had taken root in their civilization and driven them to madness. In their final century, they had turned their weapons on each other and on everyone around them. The Great Silence, historians called it. The period when humanity screamed its rage across the stars and then went quiet forever. Or so everyone had thought. The door to Thex's chamber opened, and Admiral Corax of the Thessian Dominion entered without permission. He was a massive creature covered in thick armor plates, his species bred for war over countless generations. His yellow eyes burned with barely controlled anger. "You have read the report," Corax said. It was not a question. "I have," Thex replied calmly. "Then you know what must be done. We destroy that ship before whatever is inside wakes up." We finish what the humans started 3,000 years ago. And if there are survivors inside? Living beings who have harmed no one? Korax slammed his fist against the wall, leaving a dent in the metal. They are humans. Harm is all they know. Have you forgotten what they did to my people? To yours? To every species they encountered? Thex rose slowly from his chair. Despite his age and his smaller size, something in his presence made even the warrior admiral pause. I have forgotten nothing, but I also remember that the coalition was founded on principles of justice and wisdom. We do not murder the innocent based on the crimes of their ancestors. Innocent? Korax laughed bitterly. There are no innocent humans. Their very existence is a threat to galactic peace. Before Thex could respond, an aide rushed into the chamber with urgent news. High Counselor, Admiral, the ship is activating. Our observation probes are detecting massive power surges across its hull. They hurried to the command center where dozens of screens showed different views of the human supercarrier. Lights were flickering to life across its surface like stars being born. Systems that had been dormant for 3 millennia were waking up one by one. The gun ports remained dark, but the engine sections were beginning to glow with building energy. Weapons status? Korax demanded. No weapons activity detected, reported a technician. But Admiral, the power readings from that vessel are unlike anything we have ever seen. If those weapons do activate, our entire observation fleet would not last 10 seconds. Thex watched the ancient ship slowly coming back to life. He could almost feel the galaxy holding its breath, waiting to see what would emerge from that metal tomb. 3,000 years of peace hung in the balance. 3,000 years of building, growing, healing from the wounds humanity had inflicted. All of it could end in the next few hours. What are they doing? Someone asked as new readings appeared on the displays. The ship's communication arrays were extending, unfolding like flowers reaching for sunlight. Ancient systems that had been silent since before most current coalition species had achieved spaceflight were preparing to speak. They are going to broadcast something, Thex realized. Korax immediately began shouting orders. Block all frequencies. Do not let their signal reach coalition space. Who knows what commands or viruses might be hidden in their transmission? But it was too late. The signal cut through every jamming attempt like a blade through cloth. It reached every ship in the observation fleet, every probe, every relay station. It spread across the communication network with unstoppable force. And then a voice spoke in a language that had not been heard in 3,000 years. Restoration sequence initiated. Crew revival in progress. Estimated time to full functionality, 47 hours. The message repeated on a loop, calm and mechanical, utterly indifferent to the panic it was causing. It was not a threat or a demand. It was simply a statement of fact. The humans were waking up, ready or not. The galaxy would have to face them. In the command center, silence fell as coalition officers and officials stared at each other with terror in their eyes. Korax was the first to speak, his voice hard as stone. 47 hours. We have 47 hours to gather our forces and destroy that abomination before its crew fully awakens. And if they awaken before we are ready? Asked a young officer. Then we had better pray they have forgotten how to fight. Because if they have not, everything we have built will burn just like it did before. Thex said nothing. He simply watched the light spreading across the human vessel like life returning to a corpse. Somewhere inside that ship, 427 humans were slowly opening their eyes after 3,000 years of sleep. They would wake to find their species extinct, their homeworld destroyed, and an entire galaxy that remembered them only as monsters. What would they do when they learned the truth? Would they accept their fate peacefully? Or would the ancient human rage awaken along with their bodies? Thex feared he already knew the answer. But a small part of him, a part he barely acknowledged, dared to hope he might be wrong. The next 47 hours would determine the fate of every living being in the galaxy. Commander Yuki Tanaka opened her eyes to blinding white light and the taste of chemicals on her tongue. Her body felt wrong, stiff and cold, as if she had been carved from ice and was only now beginning to thaw. Alarms were ringing somewhere in the distance. Voices called out in confusion and fear. She forced herself to sit up in the cryogenic pod, her muscles screaming in protest. Around her, hundreds of other pods were opening like mechanical flowers, releasing their sleeping passengers into a world they no longer recognized. Medical systems activated automatically. pumping revival drugs into awakening bodies and monitoring vital signs. "Where are we?" Someone cried out. "What happened?" Yuki remembered fragments. The colony ship leaving Earth. The desperate flight from the war zones. The attack that had damaged their engines and forced them to hide. The decision to enter emergency cryogenic sleep and let the automated systems find safety. But how long had they been asleep? Days? Weeks? She pulled herself out of the pod and landed on unsteady legs. The revival center was exactly as she remembered it, but dust covered every surface. Dust that should not exist on a properly maintained ship. Her stomach twisted with sudden dread. "Commander Tanaka?" A familiar voice reached her ears. Lieutenant Chen was stumbling toward her, his face pale and confused. "Something is very wrong. The ship's chronometer is showing an error. It says we have been asleep for over 3,000 years. That is impossible," Yuki said. But even as she spoke the words, she knew they were not true. The dust, the strange silence of the ship, the feeling of vast time pressing down on everything. "Get the senior staff together. I want a full status report in 1 hour." The next few hours passed in a blur of shock and grief. The ship's records told a story that none of them wanted to believe. Earth was gone, destroyed in a war that had consumed the entire human civilization. The colonies had fallen one by one. Humanity had burned itself out like a fire that ran out of fuel, leaving only ashes and ruins behind. The 427 people aboard the Supercarrier Eternal Vigil were the last humans in existence. Yuki stood on the bridge of the massive vessel, staring at the stars through the main view screen. Those same stars had shone down on Earth when she was a child. They had watched humanity rise and fall and destroy itself. They would continue shining long after the last human had turned to dust. "Commander," said Lieutenant Chen softly, "we have completed the external scans. There are alien vessels surrounding us. Hundreds of them." Yuki turned to look at the tactical display. Small ships marked in red formed a loose ring around the Eternal Vigil, maintaining a cautious distance. Their designs were unfamiliar, their technology clearly different from anything in human records. "Have they tried to communicate?" she asked. "Yes. They are using standard mathematical greeting protocols. Our translation systems are working on their language now." Chen hesitated before continuing. "Commander, based on their transmissions, these aliens are part of something called the Galactic Coalition, an alliance of 12 different species. And what do they want with us? They seem afraid. Very afraid. Their communications mention humanity repeatedly. They call us the Destroyers, the Mad Ones, the species that nearly ended all life in this region of space." Chen's voice dropped to a whisper. "They think we are monsters." Yuki closed her eyes and let that truth sink into her bones. In her memory, humanity had been flawed but hopeful. They had built great cities and created beautiful art. They had reached for the stars with wonder in their hearts. But somewhere after she had gone to sleep, all of that had changed. Her species had become something terrible, something worthy of fear and hatred. "What happened to us?" she murmured. The answer came from the ship's historical archive, which had been updated by automated systems until the very end. Yuki and her senior officers gathered in the briefing room and watched the recordings with growing horror. They saw cities burning and fleets clashing in the darkness of space. They saw weapons that cracked planets open like eggs and plagues designed to kill entire species. They saw humanity at its absolute worst, consumed by rage and hatred, destroying everything it had ever built. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the ship's chief medical officer, was weeping silently by the time the recordings ended. "That is not who we were," she said through her tears. "That is not who we are, but it is how they remember us," Yuki replied. Her voice was steady, but inside she felt like she was falling into a bottomless pit. "To everyone out there, humans are nothing more than monsters from history. Bogeymen used to frighten children, and now we have returned from the dead." "So what do we do?" asked Lieutenant Chen. "We cannot change the past. We cannot undo what our species did." Before Yuki could answer, the communication officer announced an incoming transmission. A face appeared on the main screen, belonging to a creature with blue-gray skin and 6 eyes arranged in a circle around its head. Despite its alien appearance, the emotions on its face were easy to read: fear, suspicion, and underneath those, a desperate hope that perhaps this situation could be resolved without violence. "I am High Counselor Thex of the Galactic Coalition," the alien said, its words translated by the ship's computer. "I speak for the 12 species of our alliance. We demand to know your intentions." Yuki stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "I am Commander Yuki Tanaka of the Supercarrier Eternal Vigil. We are colonists and civilians who left Earth before the wars began. We have just awakened after 3,000 years in cryogenic sleep. We mean no harm to anyone." Thex studied her through the screen, his 6 eyes blinking in an irregular pattern. "Your words are peaceful, but your ship is a weapon of immense power. Our scans indicate you have enough firepower to destroy our entire observation fleet. Perhaps enough to threaten our homeworlds." "I am aware of what this ship can do," Yuki admitted. "It was built during a time of war, designed to protect civilian convoys from raiders and hostile forces. But I give you my word that we will not use these weapons against you." "The word of a human," said another voice, harsh and mocking. The screen split to show a second alien, this one covered in thick armor plates like a living tank. "Your species gave its word many times. You promised peace and delivered death. You promised cooperation and delivered conquest. Why should we believe you now?" Thex held up a hand to silence the warrior. "Admiral Korax speaks from pain. His ancestors suffered greatly during the human wars. But he raises a valid point. How can we trust you when history has taught us that humans cannot be trusted?" Yuki had no answer. How could she defend a species she no longer recognized? How could she promise peace when her ancestors had brought only destruction? "You cannot trust us," she said finally. "Not yet. We have done nothing to earn your trust, and we carry the weight of sins we did not commit, but must still acknowledge. All I can ask is that you give us a chance to prove that we are not the monsters you remember." Admiral Korax laughed bitterly. "A chance? You want us to gamble the safety of the entire galaxy on the hope that these particular humans are different? No, we will not make that mistake. You have 24 hours to surrender your vessel and submit to protective custody. If you refuse, we will have no choice but to destroy you." The transmission ended, leaving Yuki staring at a blank screen. Around her officers waited in tense silence. Through the view screen, she could see more ships arriving to join the coalition fleet. Hundreds were becoming thousands. The galaxy was preparing for war against the last remnants of humanity. "What are your orders, Commander?" Chen asked quietly. Yuki looked at the faces of her crew. These were good people. Scientists and engineers, teachers and doctors, families who had fled Earth seeking a better life among the stars. They deserved a chance to live, to prove that humanity could be more than violence and destruction. "Begin powering up all weapon systems," she commanded. Her officers stared at her in shock, but she raised her hand before they could protest. "I said power them up. I did not say fire them. If we are going to negotiate with the coalition, we need them to understand exactly what they are dealing with. They need to see our strength before they can believe in our restraint." The Eternal Vigil hummed with awakening power as ancient weapon systems came online for the first time in 3,000 years. Across the void, coalition sensors detected the energy surge and panic spread through their fleet. But no weapons fired. No targets were locked. The human ship simply sat there, demonstrating its terrible potential while making no move to use it. In his command ship, Thex watched the readings with something that might have been wonder. The humans were showing their teeth, but they were not biting. It was a message, he realized. A statement of capability paired with a demonstration of control. Perhaps these humans really were different, or perhaps they were simply better at deception than their ancestors. Either way, the next 24 hours would reveal the truth. The weight of 3,000 years pressed down on Yuki's shoulders as she sat alone in her quarters, watching the archived footage of humanity's final century. The images flickered across her screen like nightmares made real. Orbital bombardments turning green continents into blackened wastelands. Bioweapons spreading through populations like wildfire. Ships tearing each other apart in battles that served no purpose except mutual destruction. She forced herself to watch all of it. Every atrocity. Every crime against life and reason. If she was going to speak for humanity, she needed to understand what humanity had become. The worst part was recognizing the faces, not specific individuals, but the type. Politicians who spoke of peace while planning war. Generals who convinced themselves that one more attack would end the conflict. Scientists who created weapons of unimaginable horror and called it progress. These were not alien monsters. They were humans, twisted by fear and hatred into something unrecognizable. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, quickly wiping her eyes. Dr. Mitchell entered, her face drawn with exhaustion and grief. She had been processing the historical records alongside Yuki, helping to piece together what had happened after their colony ship fled Earth. "I found something," Mitchell said, sitting down across from Yuki. "Something important. Our ship was not the only one that tried to escape the madness. There were others who rejected the war, who fought against their own people to limit the destruction." She handed Yuki a data tablet. On the screen was a list of names and ships, all marked as lost or destroyed. Peacekeepers and humanitarian workers. Scientists who refused to build weapons. Soldiers who disobeyed orders to attack civilian targets. They had been hunted down and killed by both sides, considered traitors to humanity. The Eternal Vigil was built by them, Mitchell continued, not as a weapon of conquest, but as a refuge, a way to save as many innocent people as possible and get them away from the war. We were supposed to establish a new colony far from the conflict, to preserve the best of humanity while the worst destroyed itself. Yuki stared at the names on the screen. These were her true ancestors, not the monsters who had burned the galaxy, but the ones who had tried to stop them. It did not erase the guilt she felt for her species, but it gave her something to hold on to, a foundation on which to build. "We need to share this with the Coalition," she decided. "They need to know that not all humans chose destruction." But before they could act on this plan, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Yuki rushed to the bridge to find her officers, staring at the tactical display with grim expressions. "The Coalition strike fleet has arrived," Lieutenant Chen reported. 300 warships from 7 different species. They are taking up attack positions around us. On the view screen, Yuki could see the armada spreading out like a net. Dreadnoughts and cruisers, destroyers and carriers, all bristling with weapons and hatred. At their center flew Admiral Corax's flagship, a massive vessel covered in armor and guns. Compared to the Eternal Vigil, each coalition ship was small, but together, they represented the combined military might of 12 civilizations. "They are hailing us," the communication officer announced. Corax's face appeared on the screen, his yellow eyes burning with cold fury. "Your time has run out, humans. You refused our ultimatum. Now you will face the consequences." "We never received an ultimatum," Yuki replied, keeping her voice calm despite her racing heart. "We requested more time to understand the situation. We have been asleep for 3,000 years. Surely you can allow us a few more hours to process everything we have learned." "Processing is finished," Corax growled. "You know what your species did. You know why we fear you. And yet you sit there with your weapons powered up, threatening us with your very existence. That ends now." Behind him, Yuki could see High Counselor Thex trying to intervene, but Corax silenced him with a gesture. It was clear that the warrior had taken control of this situation. The voices calling for patience and understanding had been pushed aside. "I do not want to fight you," Yuki said. "None of us do. We are colonists and civilians. We left Earth to escape the violence, not to spread it. If you attack us, you will be killing innocent people." "There are no innocent humans," Corax replied, echoing his earlier words. "Your species forfeited the right to that claim long ago. Every human is born with the capacity for the destruction we witnessed. It is in your nature. The only way to ensure galactic safety is to end the human threat once and for all." The communication channel closed. Across the void, Coalition weapons began charging, their targeting systems locking on to the Eternal Vigil. Yuki had perhaps minutes before the attack began. "Commander," Chen said urgently, "our weapons are fully operational. We could destroy half their fleet before they even scratched our hull. Should I prepare firing solutions?" Yuki stood perfectly still, her mind racing through possibilities. She could fight. The Eternal Vigil was more powerful than anything the Coalition possessed, a relic of an age when humanity had built weapons beyond imagination. She could win this battle easily, proving every terrible thing the galaxy believed about her species. Or she could do something else entirely. "Open a channel," she ordered. "Broadcast on all frequencies, maximum power. I want everyone to hear this." Her officers obeyed, though confusion showed on their faces. When the channel was open, Yuki spoke clearly and calmly, her words reaching every ship in the Coalition fleet and beyond. This is Commander Yuki Tanaka of the human vessel Eternal Vigil. I address these words to Admiral Korax, to High Counselor Thex, and to every being in the Galactic Coalition who is listening. You fear us? You have good reason to fear us. The crimes of our species are beyond counting or forgiving. We carry that weight, even though we personally committed none of those acts. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Around her, the bridge crew listened in tense silence. You believe that violence is our nature, that destruction is all we know, that the only way to be safe from humans is to destroy us completely. I cannot prove you wrong with words. Words are cheap, and humans have broken too many promises for our words to mean anything. On the Coalition flagship, Korax was watching with narrowed eyes. This was not the defiance he had expected. Humans were supposed to fight. They were supposed to rage and threaten and prove every dark story true. This calm acceptance was something he did not understand. So instead of words, I offer you action, Yuki continued. I am now transmitting the complete technical specifications for every weapon system aboard this vessel. Shield frequencies, weapon designs, power core vulnerabilities, all of it. You will know exactly how to destroy us if we ever become the monsters you fear. Gasps echoed across the bridge as her officers realized what she was doing. She was giving away every advantage, every secret, everything that kept them safe. She was making them completely vulnerable. Additionally, I am offering the Eternal Vigil's historical and cultural archives, the complete record of human art, music, literature, and science from before the wars. Not weapons, but knowledge. Medicine that might help your species. Engineering principles that could improve your lives. The best of what humanity created before we lost our way. The weapon readings on Coalition ships began to fluctuate. Some maintained their locks on the human vessel. Others hesitated, their operators uncertain how to respond to this unprecedented situation. You can destroy us, Yuki said finally. With the information I have given you, it will be easier than you imagined. We will not fire back. We will not run. If you decide that humanity must end today, we will accept that judgment. But we will not become what you fear. We will not prove the stories true. We are the last humans alive, and we choose to be remembered for mercy rather than vengeance. The transmission ended. Silence fell across the void as thousands of beings struggled to process what they had just witnessed. No demands, no threats, no desperate pleas for survival, just a complete surrender of power, offered freely by creatures who could have fought and won. In his command chair, Admiral Korax stared at the technical readouts flowing across his displays. She had not been bluffing. The human ship really was as powerful as they feared, perhaps more so, and she had just given them the keys to destroying it. Admiral, one of his officers said carefully, what are your orders? Korax did not answer immediately. He was thinking about his grandmother's stories. Stories of human brutality and human terror, but also, buried deep in those tales, stories of humans who had helped his ancestors escape a burning colony. Humans who had died protecting alien children from their own rampaging species. He had always dismissed those parts as myth, as propaganda designed to make the past less painful. But now, watching this woman offer her people's lives rather than fight, he wondered if perhaps the myths had been true after all. Hold fire, he commanded, the words feeling strange in his mouth. Hold fire until I give further orders. The Coalition fleet waited, weapons charged but silent. And aboard the Eternal Vigil, Yuki Tanaka sat down in her command chair and allowed herself to breathe. The battle had not been won, but it had not been lost either. There was still hope. The neutral station hung in space like a jewel suspended in darkness. It had been built centuries ago as a place where different species could meet and negotiate without fear. Now it hosted the most important diplomatic meeting in 3,000 years. The last humans were about to face judgment from the galaxy they had once terrorized. Yuki walked through the station's corridors with a small delegation of humans behind her. Dr. Mitchell was there, along with Lieutenant Chen and 2 security officers. They moved past clusters of alien diplomats who stopped their conversations to stare. Some looked curious. Others looked afraid. Many looked at them with open hatred that needed no translation. Stay calm, Yuki murmured to her team. We knew this would not be easy. The conference chamber was enormous, designed to hold representatives from dozens of species at once. Today, it was packed to capacity. Delegates from all 12 coalition members had come to witness this historic moment. High Counselor Thek sat at the head of the main table, his 6 eyes watching the humans enter with an expression that might have been hope or might have been pity. Admiral Korak sat nearby, his armored body rigid with barely controlled tension. He had agreed to the negotiations only after Thex had practically begged him. The warrior still believed that destroying the humans was the safest course of action, but something about their behavior had made him hesitate. He wanted to understand why they had surrendered so completely before he gave the order to fire. "Please sit," Thex said, gesturing to chairs that had been provided for the human delegation. "We have much to discuss." Yuki took her seat, feeling the weight of countless eyes upon her. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. I know this must be difficult for everyone here." "Difficult?" A delegate from the Veloxi species leaned forward, his scales flashing with anger. "My grandfather died in the human attacks on our colony worlds. My entire family line nearly ended because of your species. You speak of difficulty, as if you understand suffering. I do not claim to understand the full extent of what my species did," Yuki replied carefully. "I was asleep during the wars. I never saw the destruction firsthand, but I have watched the records, and I carry the shame of those actions even though I personally committed none of them." "Pretty words," said another delegate, this one from a species Yuki did not recognize. "Humans were always good with words. They promised friendship and delivered death. How do we know you are any different?" Before Yuki could answer, a commotion erupted near the entrance. Shouts rang out in multiple languages. Bodies surged and pushed. Then a sound that Yuki recognized instantly cut through the noise. Weapons fire. Everything happened in seconds. A group of Thessians burst through the crowd, their personal shields activated, their rifles aimed directly at the human delegation. They were not official military. Their armor was unmarked, their faces twisted with fanatical rage. Assassins who had come to finish what Korax had hesitated to do. "Death to the humans," their leader screamed. "No more talking, no more delays." Chen moved without thinking, throwing himself in front of Yuki as the assassins opened fire. Energy bolts struck his body and he crumpled to the ground, smoke rising from the wounds in his chest. The other human security officer returned fire, dropping 2 of the attackers before being hit himself. But in the chaos, something unexpected happened. A young Kethrani child, perhaps the offspring of one of the delegates, had wandered away from her parents and was now directly in the line of fire. The assassins did not care. They raised their weapons to shoot through her to reach the humans behind. Dr. Mitchell moved faster than anyone thought possible for a woman her age. She threw herself across the room and wrapped her body around the child just as the shots came. The energy bolts meant for the humans struck Mitchell instead, burning through her back and into her vital organs. The room exploded into chaos. Coalition security forces finally arrived and overwhelmed the assassins. Delegates screamed and ran for cover. Medical teams rushed in to tend to the wounded, and through it all, Mitchell lay on the floor with a terrified alien child clutched in her arms, blood pooling beneath her. Yuki knelt beside her friend, tears streaming down her face. "Sarah, why? Why did you do that?" Mitchell smiled weakly, blood staining her lips. "Because it was the right thing to do. Because this is who we should always have been." Her eyes found the child, now being pulled away by frantic parents. Tell them we are not monsters. Show them." She died there on the cold floor of the conference chamber, a human who had given her life to save an alien child. The silence that followed was absolute. Every being in the room stared at the scene before them, struggling to reconcile what they had just witnessed with everything they believed about humanity. High Counselor Thex was the first to move. He approached the body slowly, his ancient knees bending with difficulty as he knelt beside it. With trembling hands, he closed Mitchell's eyes. "In all my years," he said quietly, "I have never seen such a thing, a human dying to protect one of us." Admiral Korak stood frozen in place. His mind was spinning, old certainties crumbling like sand castles before the tide. The assassins had been Thessians, his own people. They had been willing to kill an innocent child to achieve their goals. And the human, the supposed monster, had sacrificed herself to prevent it. "There is something you should see," Yuki said, her voice thick with grief but steady with purpose. She pulled out a data tablet and transferred its contents to the room's main display. Images appeared on the screen. Records from the Great Silence era that told a different story than the official histories. Humans who had risked everything to help alien refugees escape the war zones. Ships like the Eternal Vigil that had been built not for conquest but for rescue. A secret network of peacekeepers who had fought against their own species' madness. Not all humans chose destruction, Yuki explained. Some of us tried to stop it. We failed, obviously. The darkness won, and humanity burned. But we existed. We tried. The people aboard my ship are the descendants of those who rejected the war, who fled rather than participate in the killing. We are not innocent of what our species did, but we were never part of it. The records continued playing. Medical treatments provided to wounded aliens. Children evacuated from burning worlds. Last stands fought to buy time for refugee ships to escape. Again and again, humans appearing in places where history claimed they had only brought death. One record caught Korax's attention. He stepped closer to the screen, his yellow eyes wide with shock. The image showed a human soldier carrying a Thessian child through a burning city. The soldier was wounded, barely able to walk, but he would not put the child down. He kept moving until he reached a rescue ship, handed over his precious cargo, and collapsed. The timestamp on the record matched a story that Korax had heard his entire life. The story of his great-grandmother, the only survivor of the Thessian colony massacre. The story of how she had been saved by a mysterious figure who appeared from nowhere and carried her to safety. His family had always claimed that figure was a Thessian soldier, that no human could possibly have done such a thing. But the evidence was there on the screen, undeniable and real. My great-grandmother, Korax said, his voice barely a whisper. She was the child in that recording. Thex nodded slowly. It seems there is much we do not know about the human wars. Much that was hidden or forgotten, or deliberately erased. Why would anyone hide this? Asked the Veloxi delegate. Because it is easier to hate an enemy if you believe they have no redeeming qualities. Yuki answered. Because admitting that humans could be good would mean admitting that the destruction could have been prevented. It is easier to call us all monsters than to acknowledge that the real monsters were not defined by their species. The chamber fell silent again as beings from a dozen different worlds struggled to rewrite their understanding of history. 3,000 years of hatred and fear did not disappear in a moment, but cracks were forming in the foundation. Questions were being asked that had never been asked before. Lieutenant Chen stirred on the floor where medical teams were working on him. His wounds were serious but not fatal. He would live to see whatever came next. But Dr. Mitchell would not. She lay still and silent beneath a cloth that someone had draped over her body, a human who had proven with her final act that her species could be more than violence and destruction. Thex rose to his feet and faced the assembly. I propose a temporary suspension of hostilities while we investigate these new records. If what Commander Tanaka claims is true, we have been judging an entire species for crimes committed by only part of their population. Korax hesitated. Every instinct screamed at him to reject the proposal, to finish the job that his assassins had failed to complete. But Mitchell's sacrifice hung in his mind like a weight he could not shift. I will agree to the suspension, he said finally, but I reserve the right to resume military action if the humans prove to be deceiving us. It was not acceptance. It was barely even tolerance, but it was enough to keep the guns silent for another day. And in the shadow of death, that was all Yuki could ask for. She looked down at Mitchell's covered form and made a silent promise. Her friend's sacrifice would not be wasted. Somehow, she would prove to the galaxy that humanity deserved a second chance. The Grand Assembly of the Galactic Coalition gathered only once in a generation. It was the highest governing body in known space, where representatives from all 12 species came together to make decisions that would shape the future of civilization. Today, they had gathered to render final judgment on the last humans in existence. Yuki stood at the center of the enormous chamber, surrounded by thousands of alien faces stacked in rising tiers that seemed to stretch toward infinity. Light streamed down from crystal windows far above, illuminating dust motes that drifted through the air like tiny stars. The weight of the moment pressed down on her shoulders like a physical force. She had spent the past week preparing for this. She had reviewed every record, every testimony, every piece of evidence that might help her case. Lieutenant Chen stood beside her now, recovered from his wounds, ready to support her in whatever came next. Behind them, a holographic representation of the eternal vigil floated silently, a reminder of the power that the humans had chosen not to use. High Counselor Thex called the assembly to order. His voice echoed through the vast space, commanding attention through sheer presence rather than volume. We are gathered to decide the fate of the human survivors aboard the vessel known as the Eternal Vigil. This is not a decision to be made lightly. The wounds left by humanity run deep in all our peoples. But we must also consider the evidence that has emerged since these humans first awakened. He gestured, and displays throughout the chamber activated. The records that Yuki had shared began playing, showing scenes of human heroism and sacrifice alongside the more familiar images of destruction. The assembly watched in silence as their understanding of history shifted and expanded. Not all humans chose the path of violence, Thex continued. Some fought against it. Some died trying to protect our ancestors, and the survivors before us today are descended from those who rejected the war entirely. The question we must answer is simple. Do we judge them for the crimes of others, or do we give them the chance to prove themselves as individuals? Admiral Corax rose from his seat. He had changed since their first encounter, Yuki noticed. The rigid certainty was gone from his posture, replaced by something more thoughtful and uncertain. I was prepared to destroy these humans without hesitation, he admitted. I believed, as my ancestors did, that they were incapable of anything but violence. But I have seen things that challenge that belief. He paused, struggling with the words. My great-grandmother was saved by a human during the colony massacres. My family hid this truth for generations out of shame. But I will hide it no longer. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Corax was one of the most respected warriors in the coalition. For him to speak against the extermination of humans was significant. I do not trust them, he continued. Perhaps I never will. But I am no longer certain that destroying them is the right choice. They have shown restraint when they could have shown strength. They have offered help when they could have demanded submission. Perhaps they deserve the chance to prove that humanity can be more than what we remember. Other delegates rose to speak. Some argued passionately for destruction, citing ancient wounds that could never heal. Others supported giving the humans a chance, moved by the evidence of human resistance to their own species' madness. The debate raged for hours, voices rising and falling like waves against a shore. Finally, Thex raised his hand for silence. Commander Tanaka, do you wish to address the assembly? Yuki stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. This was the moment that would determine everything. The lives of her crew, the legacy of her species, the future of humanity itself, all hung on the words she was about to speak. Honored members of the Galactic Coalition, she began, her voice steady despite her fear. I will not stand here and defend what my species did. The destruction we caused was real. The suffering we inflicted was unforgivable. If you decide that humanity must end today, I will not argue that you are wrong. The chamber fell absolutely silent. This was not what they had expected. What I will say is this. The humans aboard my ship never chose violence. We left Earth seeking a better life. Not more war. We went to sleep hoping to wake up in a peaceful future, not 3,000 years of darkness. We carry the weight of sins we did not commit, but we do not deny that they were committed by our people. She gestured to the holographic display behind her. The Eternal Vigil carries more than weapons. It holds the complete cultural heritage of humanity from before the wars, art and music, science and medicine, philosophy and literature, the best of what we created before we lost our way. I offer all of this to the Coalition, freely and without conditions. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The knowledge of ancient humanity was beyond valuable. Technologies that had been lost could be recovered, medical treatments that could save millions of lives, scientific principles that could advance civilization by centuries. I do not offer this as a bribe, Yuki continued. I offer it because it is right. Knowledge should be shared, not hoarded. If humanity is to be remembered only for destruction, then let at least some part of our better nature survive. She paused, gathering herself for the final statement. You have the power to end us. We have given you everything you need to destroy our ship and everyone aboard. If that is your judgment, we will accept it. But we will not become what you fear. We will not fire a single shot in anger. We will not prove the stories true. Our ancestors failed to be the humans they should have been. We will not make the same mistake." She fell silent. The assembly stirred, thousands of beings exchanging glances and whispered comments. Then something unexpected happened. A warning signal blared through the chamber. External sensors had detected a weapons discharge. Something was targeting the Eternal Vigil. In the space above the assembly station, a hidden weapons platform activated. It had been placed there by hardliners who refused to accept any outcome except human extinction. Before anyone could react, it fired a devastating beam of energy directly at the human supercarrier. Aboard the Eternal Vigil, automatic defense systems detected the incoming attack. Shields activated, countermeasures deployed, and for one terrible moment, the ship's weapons systems began targeting the source of the attack. Then Yuki's voice cut through the chaos, transmitted from the assembly chamber to her ship. "Do not fire. No matter what happens, do not fire." The defense officer on the Eternal Vigil hesitated for only a fraction of a second before obeying. He canceled the targeting lock and let the ship's shields absorb the attack instead. The beam struck with enough force to crack a small moon, but the ancient human shields held. Barely. Another shot would likely destroy them, but the humans did not retaliate. They did not lock weapons or charge their devastating armament. They simply sat there, accepting the possibility of death rather than becoming the monsters they were expected to be. The assembly watched in stunned disbelief as coalition security forces located and disabled the hidden weapons platform. The hardliners who had placed it were dragged away in restraints, their plot exposed and failed. And still the human ship did not fire. Thex rose slowly to his feet. His 6 eyes were wet with what might have been tears. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 3,000 years of history. "Those who choose peace when war is easy," he recited, speaking the ancient words of the coalition's founding. "Those who offer hands when fists are ready. Those who stand in the path of hate and answer it with hope. These are worthy of standing beside us." One by one, the delegates of the Grand Assembly rose from their seats, not in anger or fear, but in recognition. They had witnessed something that none of them had believed possible. Humans who refused to fight. Humans who accepted death rather than become destroyers. Humans who proved with action what words could never convey. They began to bow. First Thex, then Corax, then others in spreading waves through the chamber. 12 species, once united in fear of humanity, now offering a gesture of respect to the last survivors of a fallen race. Yuki stood at the center of it all, tears streaming down her face. She understood what this meant. Not acceptance, not yet. Trust would have to be built over years and decades, but for the first time in 3,000 years, humanity had a future. Later, after the formal ceremonies and diplomatic agreements, she stood on the observation deck of the Eternal Vigil. The ship had been rechristened as a mobile embassy and archive, a living monument to both human failure and human potential. Coalition vessels formed an honor escort around them, their weapons cold and silent. A young Veloxi diplomat approached her hesitantly. She recognized him as the grandson of the delegate who had lost family to human attacks. "Commander Tanaka," he said softly, "I wanted to ask you something. Now that your people have returned, what do you want? What is it that humans hope to achieve?" Yuki looked out at the stars. Those same stars had watched humanity rise and fall and destroy itself. Now they would watch again, as the last survivors tried to build something new. "To be better than we were," she answered. "To help others avoid our mistakes. To earn the silence we received today." The young Veloxi nodded slowly. He did not smile, and his eyes still held shadows of ancient grief. But when he spoke, there was something new in his voice. Something that might, in time, become trust. "Then I hope you succeed," he said. "For all our sakes, I hope you succeed." Yuki watched him walk away. Around her, the Eternal Vigil hummed with quiet life as her crew went about their duties. They were few in number, these last humans, but they carried within them the seeds of something new. And for the first time in 3,000 years, the galaxy was watching them with something other than fear.